Hi, welcome to the Interaxis channel. So I wanted to explain a little bit today about Bitcoin mining and how it positively affects clean energy, or the thought of clean energy. And of course, we think of this as like renewable energy, solar, wind, water energy, hydro energy, whatever we might want to think about. And the reason why I want to explain it to you is if you are a financial advisor, which most of our audience is, you might get questions from clients. We still get those questions and those thoughts around the environmental impact of Bitcoin mining. And if there's so much energy devoted to this, is that a waste? Is that causing more issues with the environment, more greenhouse gases and such? So I wanted to talk a little bit about how it's working and why it's actually, in our minds, a positive for clean energy or renewable energy. And to do that, we do get to go into a little bit of the economics of Bitcoin mining. And I'm not going to go super deep. I am not, I don't work for a large Bitcoin mining firm or fund. I have done Bitcoin mining in the past in my home state of Texas, so I do know a bit about it. I do know a bit about the economics of it. Not going to pretend to be one of the publicly traded Bitcoin miners or anything like that. So let's talk a little bit about how it works. So what is Bitcoin mining? In essence, it is I am connecting computers. So these computers are called Bitcoin miners. So let's draw them here. Of course, I'm awful at art, but let's draw the Bitcoin miners here. And so I might have several hundred to several thousand of these computers. And what I'm doing with them, the only thing I'm doing with them is they are connected to power and they are connected to the internet. And all they are doing is trying to process all these Bitcoin transactions, trying to process blocks on the Bitcoin blockchain with the hope of being rewarded, being the one miner that gets to process the next block of Bitcoin transactions, the next group of Bitcoin transactions, and in so doing, win that block reward. That block reward currently sits, as I'm writing this, as I'm recording this, at 6.25 Bitcoin. Starting in April of 2024, it will go down to 3 1/8, so 3.125 Bitcoin. That will be the block reward for every block. Every 10 minutes, this will be the reward. So this is what these miners are trying to do. Now, their costs that go into this are, they have capital expenditure. They have to buy these miners, right? They have to pay for them. They have to pay for land somehow because you have to put them, somewhere. You have to have land to put them, and you essentially have to pay for these miners. Those are the biggest capital outlays. And the miners are not cheap. They're generally pretty much all of them produced in China by just a few companies. And so you buy the miners, and then the ongoing operational expenses. So the OPEX you have is you have to pay for electricity, which is the biggest one. And then you have to pay for things like internet. You have to pay for people to help manage them. You have to pay for people to keep them up, those kinds of things. But the whole goal, the only thing you're doing with these potentially hundreds or thousands, sometimes dozens of miners, is you're trying to produce Bitcoin. You're trying to get more Bitcoin as a reward. So this is your only product. Now, these do take up a tremendous amount of energy. These miners take up a tremendous amount of energy because they're processing now over 200 trillion transactions per second. So just think about that. They are going so fast all the time, 24/7, 365, processing 200 trillion transactions, 200 trillion hashes per second, and you might have hundreds to thousands of them. So a lot of the electricity goes into powering the miners, but a whole lot of it goes into making sure that everything stays cool, because of course they put off a tremendous amount of heat, and you have to keep the area cool. You have to get that heat out of there, and that's where a lot of the electricity goes into. So the electric cost is really the driver of whether or not a miner is profitable or not. The electric cost and the price of Bitcoin, because if the price of Bitcoin goes up and they can sell a little bit of Bitcoin to pay for the electricity costs, they can become profitable. So what's happening here is obviously miners, companies that are miners, mining companies want to find the lowest cost energy they can. That's why so many of them have relocated to, again, my home state of Texas, because in Texas we have deregulated energy, meaning they can negotiate the power cost if they want to. On top of that, in Texas, we also have a tremendous amount of energy. We have a tremendous amount of natural gas and oil. So that's where I'm going to dive into why Bitcoin mining actually makes sense from an environmental perspective. So to clue people in a little bit on how energy works, how oil discovery works, how oil drilling and works. And please don't get on me about all the nuances of oil, because I'm not going to explain all of that right now. But for the most part, when companies go drill for oil, and I'll talk about how it works in Texas, when they go drill for oil, right? So they have this oil derrick. They're drilling here, they're drilling here, they're drilling here. Now they have a pretty good idea based on their surveys and everything else where the oil is. So they come down, they hit oil. What they also usually hit is natural gas. Now, oil might be $60, $70 a barrel. It might be $90 or $100 a barrel. There are pipelines that are built because you can't necessarily produce the energy. So you can't have, the power plant producing the energy right here where the oil comes out, because then you have to transmit it somewhere, because where the oil is not necessarily where the people are. It's not where the homes are and the businesses and what you need the electricity for. So it wouldn't be efficient to produce the energy right here and then have to transmit it, because the farther you have to transmit electricity, the more it loses and loses and loses along the way. So you try to produce the energy or the electricity close to where you're actually going to use it. So what happens? Oil comes out of the ground. We have these pipelines that are underground. We pipe it somewhere where it can be processed, and it can be turned into gasoline. It can be turned into other petroleum products, and it can be turned into energy at some points closer to where you and I live. Therefore, the cost is down because it's more efficient to do so. Now, for natural gas that also comes out of these same wells. They drill for oil comes out, but natural gas also comes out. Now, there aren't as many natural gas pipelines. And the reason, because natural gas isn't worth as much. It might be a tenth or less of the price of oil, and therefore there might not be pipelines right there. So a lot of the oil and gas drillers don't necessarily want to do anything with the gas. They have no place to put it. And so they will pipe the oil out because they can get paid for that, but they can't do anything with the gas. So what they've done in the past is what's called flare it, meaning they literally set it on fire and burn it off into the atmosphere, because it's cheaper for them to do that than for someone to come along and build a pipeline to get that gas somewhere. Okay, so what Bitcoin miners have done is they've said, look, we can take that natural gas, not the oil that you're piping out. We'll take that natural gas, we will put it through a generator, and we will connect our Bitcoin miners. And as long as we have internet, we can be producing Bitcoin right here. Why? Because we don't lose any efficiency here, because we're generating the power from the natural gas, and we're immediately turning it into Bitcoin that we can sell. So this is efficiency. This is better for the environment than just burning off the natural gas right away. You're actually turning it into electricity, turning it into Bitcoin that might be useful somewhere. Okay, so that was step one. Here's step two. Step two is, so many people in the world have said, we want some sort of solar energy. We want some sort of wind energy. We want something that we call clean. We want something that we call renewable, something that doesn't require burning fossil fuels, even though natural gas, for the most part, especially the ones in Texas, is a very clean burning fuel. What a lot of people have said is we need renewable solar and wind. Here's the problem with solar and wind. If you have a whole lot of area where you can get a lot of sun, you don't necessarily have a lot of people living there. When there's people, there's homes and there's trees and there's buildings and things in the way of the big solar panels that are trying to produce the electricity. So solar farms in recent years have been either really small or they have been out in the middle of nowhere. And as we talked earlier, if you have these solar arrays somewhere and you have to get that electricity somewhere else, you're going to lose so much efficiency that it's not going to be worth it. The same thing happens with wind. If there's a ton of wind, and this is my attempt, I apologize, to draw a wind turbine, but if you drive through North Texas, West Texas, if you drive through several states, you'll see these wind turbines. What you won't see is a whole lot of cities around the wind turbines. Therefore, again, it's not efficient. So people have produced the turbines and put them in mainly with tax credits. So that's you and me and everyone else who's paying taxes, subsidizing the building of solar plants and wind wind farms, even though that electricity, that energy, either might not make it to most people or is going to be so expensive because there are going to have to be so many stops along the way that try to amplify the power because it's not going to be very efficient. But it's been funded with tax dollars under this idea of we need cleaner or renewable energy, even though it's not efficient. Now, there will be a time where it'll be more efficient to produce solar or wind power and get it somewhere. We'll have battery power, our batteries that are able to hold it better. We will have the ability to transmit that electricity better. But the money that's going into that isn't quite there yet. So what can we do in the meantime? Well, what we can do in the meantime is we can set up a solar farm and put the Bitcoin miners right there. And that way, instead of the electricity having to go really far, it can go into power the Bitcoin miners. That means that the company that's going to develop the solar farm or develop the wind turbines or the wind farm is going to be able to profit from day one. They're not going to need the tax credit. They'll probably get it, but they won't need it. They're going to be able to profit from the fact that they created the solar panels or they put up the wind turbines right away, while we wait, while we experiment, and while we figure out how to actually get that power to homes, how we actually figure out how to get that power to businesses in places where people actually live. So in the past, again, solar and wind power has been very much subsidized by tax dollars, but now it can be part of a business. And part of that business is we can attach Bitcoin miners to it, and you can actually profit from having that solar farm or profit from having that wind farm, even though you might not be selling that power very far. So this is where we are seeing the opportunity for Bitcoin mining to actually bring the demand for power directly to the source for power, such that you can find new ways to develop power. And that can be renewables like solar and wind. It can be biofuel plants, which is basically taking your garbage essentially, or taking tree waste or yard waste or something and burning it and converting that into energy. And you can do that and still profit, still make money, still have a wildly successful company, even though you're not able to get your electricity very far because you don't have to, because there's so much demand for it right here in these Bitcoin miners. So I wanted to address this because there is still talk about how Bitcoin mining is bad for the environment. And I wanted to talk about how it actually is helping us to develop more renewable energy. It's helping to give the incentive to develop more solar and wind energy, such that these will get more efficient. The transmission of electricity will likely get more efficient. We're also, doing Bitcoin mining with natural gas, which is much cleaner than using coal or some other fossil fuels for energy, for electricity production. So this is where, because remember, Bitcoin miners are going to go to wherever the cheapest source of energy is, the least expensive, and coal and oil are much more expensive sources of fuel. So Bitcoin miners are trying to find the cheapest source. And oftentimes that is renewables. Oftentimes that is natural gas, especially stranded natural gas that was going to be burned off into the atmosphere anyway. And now they're finding uses for it because they're bringing the demand for energy directly to the source for that energy. So I hope this made sense. I hope when people bring up the idea that Bitcoin mining is bad for the environment, someone can reference this video and say, well, let me explain to you why it's actually good for the idea of renewable energy.